This is Jim Stagnitta, head coach of the PLL Whipsnakes, and you're listening to Pro Lacrosse Talk.
On Schreiber. Sidearm whip, scores! Now in front, Fidel scores! Ball Rabel, splits two and scores!
Carly O'Miller showing off those shifty skills.
Kelly, not shy, bounces one home! What a start!
Welcome to Pro Lacrosse Talk, the voice of Pro Lacrosse. I'm Hunton, he's Adam. Together we're bringing you interviews with your favorite players and coaches, as well as news from all 4 professional lacrosse leagues.
PLT is lucky enough to have head coach of the PLL Whipsnakes, Jim Stagnitta, with us today. Stagnitta has coached numerous teams at many different levels in his career, including both NCAA Division III and I, the MLL, and now the PLL. His Whipsnakes will be in the championship of the inaugural season for the PLL this weekend in Philly. Coach Stag, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, guys.
Awesome. So we're going to start a little bit back kind of during your career. So you went to high school in Syracuse and ended up finding yourself playing at Penn for the Quakers and led them to a couple Ivy League titles and an NCAA championship appearance in your junior and senior season. What was kind of your big influencer and decision-making process behind kind of going to Penn and getting into coaching?
Well, I don't know if any of us really plan on getting into coaching, but I had, my path to Penn was the only one in my family that went to a 4-year college at that time. It was all new to us. We didn't know a lot about it. Certainly a lot different than it is today. Kind of blue collar area where I grew up, so a lot of my friends and teammates stayed close to home. I had some opportunities to do a couple different things. Part of my decision was, early on I was going to have a chance to at least try to play football. I had some opportunities at the Division III level and lower Division I, and I thought that was something I wanted to try. I was, not honestly, if I told you the groups of schools I looked at, it went from everything from Princeton, Penn, and Cornell to to schools like, Albany, Cortland, Ithaca. It was a wide range. And again, not being as attuned to this as some other people were. For me, Penn was, Penn was the best fit. It was, for a guy from East Syracuse, it was diverse. I was in a city which really appealed to me. I had a guidance counselor at that point that was really influential and, kind of helped me understand the quality of education and help me, compare things in a way that, I can make a decision that was best for me. And, it just worked out. And again, if I could do it all over again, I'd go right back there. I love the place and it's done unbelievable things, for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. And, you touched on being a Penn bit, but following your time at Penn, you were, you played there and then you were an assistant there for a little bit. You went on to coach at Washington and Lee, where you have more wins than any other coach in that program's history. Then you headed to Rutgers, where you were a huge influence in engineering one of the biggest turnarounds in Division I lacrosse history. You led Rutgers to a 10-5 record after going 2-12, and you led them to back-to-back NCAA appearances in 2003 and 2004. One of my former coaches, the late Coach Mike Schambach, was also on that team with you too, which I thought was a cool connection. And, following that, you've coached with the Denver Outlaws, Arcadia University, which we actually played you guys the one year. You were at Penn as an assistant again, the Charlotte Hounds, and now finally, the Whipsnakes. So you're kind of a no-bad coach of sorts, and I don't mean that in a negative way because you've certainly had success in, every level that you've been at. But kind of what goes through your thought process when deciding on your next step in your coaching journey?
Well, believe it or not, it was more thought out than it might seem. I mean, my first 2 runs were long runs for WPLL for 12 years. I was at Rutgers for 10 or 11 years. Yeah. And, had good runs at both. Certainly had some challenges and some things that I faced at Rutgers, which was a great learning experience for me. But there was, there was stuff that was, that was out of my control. And, I think I think you learn from every situation you're in. And, it was for the first time in my career, I was, found myself kind of on the backside of some of these wins and losses. And again, it helped me in a lot of ways in kind of how I approach coaching and how I, continue to approach business now. So, and then from there, to be perfectly honest, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I had left Rutgers and I had been a coach for all my life, but I had also started some businesses, the MVP tournaments, which were very successful, and built out another business called Pregame Lacrosse, which I passed on or was able to integrate with another company that took it over, and I sold the MVP tournaments to NXT, who about 5 years ago did a great job with kind of maintaining that. So I have an entrepreneurial kind of business piece that's led to kind of all the stuff that I'm doing now. But I kind of went back and forth there for a while. I really enjoyed coaching Denver, and again, learned a lot, and it was a great experience out there. It was Tony Seaman was my GM, and who was my college coach at Penn, and again, that was a great experience. I think the travel, started to catch up, and I had an opportunity to fill a void that they needed filled at Arcadia for a year, and it got me a little bit closer to home. My kids were in high school. My daughter was starting college, so I hadn't been around, honestly, a whole lot for those prior years. Following that, I had a chance to go back to Penn, and to be perfectly honest with you, I loved being an assistant at that level. I was, taking the head coach tag off you and just being able to really focus on the development and spending time with the players and making sure that their experience, and was, that they're having a good experience, that they're successful in every aspect of their lives. And just focusing on, kind of the lacrosse pieces of it. I really enjoyed that. And, I did it for those couple of years, but again, because my son was in high school, I was driving up 95 every day and, from Princeton, New Jersey. And, I did make a commitment to my family when my son started college. He plays at Hopkins, that I was going to, I was going to be there, and I was going to leave college coaching. And, and I did that. And then I really enjoyed that time, and I really enjoyed that position. I started, jumped into another business. I own part of an indoor facility where we do high-end training in Flemington. So we use all former college coaches. I started the Complete Athlete 360 in the MVP development group, where we work with, everything from high school to college to professional teams and corporations in the areas of leadership development and culture and communication. And I really enjoyed that. That's allowed me to put 30 years of experience, which I wasn't sure how to do, into a consulting and being able to share that, kind of that experience. We don't run into anything at any level on any team that I hadn't dealt with at some point during my career. So, I really enjoyed that piece of it. And then, obviously the run with Charlotte was nice, but when the PLL, offered me this opportunity, again, I'm entrepreneurial and I love startups, and, they felt like I could bring some value to them, and a lot of respect for Paul and Mike and what they were doing. So at this point, it made a lot of sense for me to be able to make the jump over, and I've been fortunate enough to coach the Whipsnakes and also coach a bunch of guys that I'd had experience, coaching at the professional level previously.
That's awesome. I actually run shot clock and game clock at Hopkins for the guys squad. So if you're ever up for a game, I'll have to chat in person one time. But definitely. I'm up for all the games. Awesome. Okay. That's never an issue. I'm on the other side, sitting alone in the corner, though. Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Absolutely perfect. So it's kind of been an up and down season for the Whipsnakes. I mean, it's a fantastic opportunity in the championship. You started out 4-0 with 3 OT wins. The Cardiac Snakes kind of players were calling you, and then you stumbled a little bit in the middle of the season, and were able to kind of get the second seed in the playoffs and are on the upswing. So how do you manage players kind of through that up and down process and kind of the ebbs and flows of the season? And how were you able to kind of refocus and kind of regroup after that kind of lull in the middle of the season?
Yeah, every team that I've ever been in, that I've ever coached or I've ever been on, you're going to run into this at some point. And honestly, if how you manage it, how you come out on the other side of it, and how if you can learn from the mistakes you've made and have the opportunity to regroup, you tend to come out stronger, you tend to come out better, and like you said, you tend to learn from it. 4-0, and I just wrote something for the PLL Coaches Corner. 4-0 was great, and it certainly gave us a jump on the competition. But at that point, I don't know that any of us, at least from a coaching staff, were unbelievably comfortable knowing that, yeah, we were 4-0, but we were also 4 goals away from being 0-4.
Sure.
So we understood just kind of how tenuous our position was, and obviously at that point we certainly embraced and realized just how competitive this league was going to be, week in and week out. We did not, and I've said it publicly, we didn't handle the bye weeks very well. I think June into July, and at some point it got pretty choppy, week off, all-star game, couple weeks off. And, we have a combination of young guys who are new to professional athletics, and we had some older guys, and some of those older guys have real jobs outside of lacrosse. Not that lacrosse isn't a real job for some guys, but, they have office jobs and travel. And, we were a little banged up, and, we just, we struggled. I mean, we struggled in that, I'm not sure that we prepared the way we needed to prepare. We got away a little bit from who we are and what makes us successful. One of the things we talk about is, the best players don't win, but the best teams do. And, I truly believe we are a team. And, I mean, it's great to have, it's helpful in some ways to have a lot of kids from one college program, but, they're also pretty hard on each other. And it said again in this article, it's like a family, step up and make sure that, that they solve the problem. And sometimes when you step up to solve the problem, it becomes, more individual than team oriented. And, we, 4-1, we were in good shape after the first half of the year. We didn't expect to go undefeated, and we started that second half off slowly. I think we went 1-2. And, we talked, at that point, we were just starting to get healthy again. But we kind of, we've got the captains, and we just talked about, hey, what got us here? What made us successful? We talked about kind of embracing our roles and doing doing the little things again. And honestly, it's just part of it was inconsistency. A couple of those games we just didn't shoot well. But, some of it was within games. We would have great runs, and then we'd go on long droughts. And, talked about, kind of as we got down to where we had to win against the Redwoods to not just get a 1-2 seed, but even to get ourselves in the playoffs.
Sure.
Things started to change then. We got back to kind of what we were early in the year, and, even better. I think that, we're playing our best lacrosse of the year right now, which is important. And again, just kind of, got back to what got us there. And it's kind of that team approach and everybody doing their job and being more consistent over 48 minutes, because it only takes a few minutes in one of these games,
sure,
for the whole momentum and tide to turn.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, I read your article on the Coach's Corner, and I really enjoyed it. And I liked, too, how you said you guys got back to the basics. You put an emphasis on the fundamentals such as assisted goals, riding, and, winning the ground ball battle. How has your coaching philosophy kind of evolved over the years, and starting with the Whipsnakes this year, or has it stayed the same most of the time?
No, it's evolved. I've become, I was a head coach when I was 25 years old, or, I was the youngest head coach in the country at a place at a time when WNL was one of the premier programs in all of lacrosse early on. And, I had a lot to learn. And, my approach then was completely different from, my overall approach now. I've always believed in kind of the fundamentals and in that you build things from the smallest piece up. But, how I interact, and, I've always built relationships. That's always been important. Even when, in college, I always had the players over. I always spent time in the weight room and in the training room, and tried to, do everything I could to make sure they were successful in everything they did. But, my approach is gotten a lot softer, a lot more collaborative, and, over the years. I mean, when you do it as long as I have, you have to adjust. again, I've learned a great deal, and from working with the professional athletes has really helped my coaching. It's helped in-game coaching, and it's helped from a communication standpoint. I mean, they're men, they're adults, and they still I still have a expectation of them, and but at the same time, I have a ton of respect for what they have to say, and they have a lot of input in what we do, and a lot of getting us through the ups and downs of this season was a collaborative effort and asking questions and being curious and finding out where we're missing the mark, and what we needed to do to get back on track.
That's awesome. And kind of as you look ahead to this big weekend in Philly, what do you think the biggest challenge will be facing a Redwoods team that's on a hot streak right now? And I know you don't want to give any of the secret sauce away going into this weekend, but anything stick out to you that you'd like to talk about?
One of the things I said over and over again is, I've coached in a number of NCAA and played in NCAA games, yep. NCAA tournament games, and every game in the PLL feels like like you're in an NCAA tournament game. The intensity and every second there's, it's unbelievable. You turn your head and, the intensity is amazing. So, what we've learned and what I've learned is, that the team that can stay the most consistent, over 48 minutes is, tends to be the one that's going to, that's going to come away with a win. One thing we've done a good job of is I think we lead the league in the least number of turnovers. That's important. Coming away with what we call, no empty possessions, come away with something as often as we can. So, I think that the big key here is going to be, how quickly can we settle in and handle the intensity and the spotlight and the excitement of being in a championship game. And there's a lot of hype around all of this, the league and this championship. And I was there the other night in Red Bull, and, sitting in the stands, and not being on the sideline, I was just amazed at the excitement and intensity of everything going on around me. So our ability to manage that early on is going to be important. Yeah,
it should be a great venue, in Philly. But let's talk a little bit less about the pro game now, and kind of our final question before we get into our 5 and 5 is, at a macro level, the sport is growing at a rapid rate, and you talk about the excitement for the game, at these PLL games. It's really growing at the youth level. How do you see the sport continuing to grow, and what's one hurdle you think the sport needs to overcome to continue this rapid growth?
Well, a couple things. I ran some of the first camps early on in California and Texas. So I saw, what was happening, and I saw where it was going early on. And I think, and that was, literally 20 years ago when I started running those camps. The quality has changed because in these emerging areas, it's no longer, it's no longer like a fringe sport, right? It's not. Now the best athletes are starting to play, all across the country. I think what I see the PLL, and I thought this from the beginning. I had these conversations with Paul and the leadership. Is I felt like the PLL would educate people as to what this game really can look like, and how when it's played at its highest level with its best players. Because I don't think anyone. I don't think a lot of people have had the opportunity in these emerging areas, including parents and coaches, to really see what this game is like, when the best players are out there, and between the social media presence of the PLL and the TV exposure, I think people are starting to see it, and it's starting to really interest people in a way that it hadn't before, because, regardless of what we think about our sport, there's a lot of people that still have never heard of it or never seen it, and I still run into those people all the time. But
absolutely.
It's become a forum and a arena for people to really see, how skilled these guys are and how athletic they are and how exciting this game is. And, when I'm at these games now and I see all these young kids there, it's that, to me, that is that's been the impact that it's had, and I think that's the direction it's going in, right? The people who, it becomes a responsibility of those who have played it at a high level and those who have coached it to, now we have a vehicle to share it, and I think it's making a difference. We got to, we got to stay the course, but I think this is, invigorated the whole kind of lacrosse foundation to, is gain interest from a lot of different areas where I don't think there was interest in the past, including from other professionals, and you guys see the impact it's had, and I think this is what it needed, and it gave it a real shot in the arm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I gotta agree with that, and just like you mentioned, just seeing that these people are athletes. Like, there are athletes in this game, and the broadcasts have been first class, and I think that's something. I'm in the broadcast industry, so it's something to say, like, when you're watching it on TV, it feels like a professional league. So yeah, I have to agree with all those points.
I was there this weekend as well, Coach, and it was such an electric atmosphere for us in the stands, and I can only imagine what it would be like coaching on those sidelines. So I completely agree.
It was awesome. It really was. It was
absolutely
awesome.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of the Pro Lacrosse Talk podcast. We've been using Anchor for our podcast since the very start. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place, and better yet, it's free. They allow you to easily record and edit your podcast so it sounds great, and send it out to all the major networks such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and many more. Better yet, they connect you with advertisers so you can start making money from your podcast right away. So if you're interested in starting a podcast, download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Adam, do you want to start off with the 5 and 5 segment? So we'll start off with our lacrosse related questions. Really, just some quick answers here. Hopefully you don't have to think too much. We try not to trip you guys up too much with these. And then the second half will be the life related ones that don't have to do with lacrosse. So trying to get to know you guys better, outside of the game of lacrosse as well. So why don't you take it away, Adam?
Sure. First one's an easy one. Any pregame superstitions that you have or routines before games?
I try not to, because my wife's a former coach and player, and she is unbelievably superstitious.
Okay.
But there's things I can't help but think about, and I'm not as cut and dry with that. But there'll be I'll think about when I get my hair cut. I'll think about what I wear. Sure. I might look back at a game and see what I was wearing on a good day. I know it has nothing to do with anything, but I'm not quite as superstitious as some people. But I have, there's little things that I do.
Sure. Hopefully you'll create a favorite memory this weekend. But to this point, what's been your favorite lacrosse memory over your career?
I've had a couple, that really stick out. That team at Rutgers that season that we went, my first year there, kind of got in late, and there was some turmoil, and with that same group of guys, the next year we won the ECAC, and we were ranked in the top 8, and we were in the NCAA tournament, for a couple of years in a row with that same group. To me that was, being able to do that with those guys. And same guys, it was terrific. At WPLL there were some, my last year at WPLL we were, I think, 12 or 13-1. We lost one year before with that same team. We lost to Salisbury in the semifinals by a goal late. So this team was loaded, and the goal was to win a national championship. And we really thought we could have. We ran through the season. We lost the game on a Wednesday, and at Hampton Sydney driving over the hill, and we just didn't play well that day. But that year we beat Limestone, who was the Division II champ. We beat Gettysburg, who was in the Division III final. We ran, nobody was close to us all year, and we couldn't go to the NCAA tournament because there were no at-large bids that year. But somehow, we had 3 games left. We finished that season, and, those guys, I think it probably had a bigger impact on them than winning a championship, because they learned so much from it, because it was hard for them to finish this out, knowing that, it helped me to define success a little differently. We ended up number 2 in the country and not in the NCAA tournament, but, guys still talk about, how it was a challenge to get us to finish the season. We still had VMI, Limestone, and another league game. So I think those two experiences as a coach and, playing in the Final Four as a coach at Penn when Gary Gate jumped over to Cage, that was another one of those, 11-10 games that we were on the, on the other side of. I guess a lot of my best memories are 1-goal losses, but those type of things, just because this is much about the people that I was able to do that with.
Absolutely.
It's, more so than even what the event itself was.
Sure.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I know Coach Schambach would always talk to us about the game when you guys went into the Dome and beat Syracuse and how proud he was about that moment. And also he kind of used that as some motivation for us too. He's like, you can never doubt yourself. You're never out of a game until you get into it. And so that was always, I think, some of our motivation. He'd talk about Cuse in the Dome, and that would always be kind of what he'd try to get us to light a fire when we'd have some big games. So I think that was definitely on his biggest memories as well that season.
Well, that was part of that team. It's nothing better than going back to the place you grew up in front of the people you grew up with, against the school that you've always rooted for, and being able to come away with, with a win. So that certainly, and, like I said, it's the guys that I did it with, like Mike Schambach. I mean, God bless him. I love the kid and so proud of him, but that was, he was part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome. And kind of going off of that, you had a pretty unique season this year, kind of the first in PLL history, obviously. And you have a cast of characters, it seems like, on the Whipsnakes. We're always curious, which player on your squad do you find the funniest?
Well, they have different sense of humor. Obviously, the first, the most obvious one is, you'd say Rambo, right?
Sure.
And I'm not sure he's even trying to be funny most of the time. I love Matt, and I've known him, been able to coach him for a few years here. And, he's just got a great way about him. But there's some guys like, Jake Bernhardt. I don't know if you saw the video the other day of just the way he looked at that kid in the stands.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, I can't stop laughing at that. He is, he's hilarious. Kyle Bernler has a great sense of humor, dry and sarcastic, which is along the lines of, of the way I am. So they all have, there's some personalities there. They're all different, but it's a good, I'd say cast of characters. It's a great group of guys.
Yep. That's awesome. And kind of staying along the PLL lines, what's been the biggest surprise in regards to what you were expecting from the PLL this year? Any big surprises?
I think the intensity of every minute of every game, I thought it would be, and again, I've coached at this level. So yeah, in the speed, absolutely. Those two things, I didn't think it could get any faster, and it has. And just the intensity, you're on, you feel like you're in overtime every minute of every game. It really, it in some ways is great, but it wasn't exactly, the way I expected it to be. I just hadn't been in an atmosphere that's been that, electric and stressful at the same time.
Sure. No, that makes complete sense. And then last lacrosse-related question. Who's someone in the lacrosse community that you admire or looked up to, whether that's a previous coach or a previous teammate, opponent, or one of your players?
Oh, God. After all these years, there's so many people. I mean, certainly Tony Seaman had a great impact, in my life. He hired me to be his assistant, give me my first college job, and, then brought me on in Denver, my first professional job. Mm-hmm. I like Billy Tierney's always been someone that I've called on when I need direction, and he's been a good friend. The Kevin Corrigans of the world. I mean, again, there's so many, and the players, it's not even, fair to start. I've been so fortunate to coach so many great ones, over my career, but and again, when you've been in it as long as I have, there's a lot of people that are going to have impacts. And it was important for me because when I was 25 years old, I didn't have a big line of mentors. I had Tony. I was able to, kind of build that while I was coaching. And a lot of those people have had, like I said, great impacts on my career and how I approach things.
Sure.
Yeah, it's awesome. We're going to dive into some life-related questions now. The first one I'll ask is, what are some hobbies or activities you enjoy doing when you're not coaching?
Well, that's the problem with being a coach. We always say it's just terrible. Like, what are my hobbies? My hobbies. I love to eat good food, and I love to drink good wine. Which means that I like to work out as much as I can, which allows me to do both of those things. And again, I tend to spend most of my time outside of coaching on my businesses, and I enjoy that aspect of it, and creating something and building something and helping people, by using kind of my personal experiences. And I love to play more golf. I live at the beach, and I'm looking at 2 fishing poles right now that I haven't taken out since I moved here a year ago. So there's some things I'd like to be able to do, but if golf didn't take 4 hours, I'd probably play a little bit more of it.
Absolutely. Well, going off of that, my second question was actually going to be, what's your favorite meal, and do you prefer to dine out, take out, or cook at home?
That's a good question. I like to dine in. My wife's a good cook, but I also like to go out and try, like, whenever I'm in town. It's a running thing with Ryan Boyle and I is, and I think some of the guys on lacrosse will tell you, surprisingly, for a guy from East Syracuse, I like to find good restaurants and try different places out. Having not traveled much when I was a kid or did much, still enjoy everywhere, kind of everywhere I go, and trying to explore and find out as much as I can about places. But, it's probably 50-50. My favorite meal, it's kind of two different, I'm an upstate New Yorker, so I love chicken wings. I'm going to, it's kind of a contradiction because, I also like going to nice restaurants, but, I probably, I would just as readily eat pizza and chicken wings as I would, a nice Italian meal or seafood. So.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned like the travel aspect. What's been your favorite place to go? Maybe it's one that you haven't been before. Maybe it's one that you have.
It's been a couple. I'm looking forward to going to Philly. Obviously, I've spent a lot of time there. What I did on a couple of these, 3 of them. Went to Canada. I brought my family. My son was just before he was going back to college. We had been there a few times in the past for games and, seeing Niagara Falls. It was nice to get everybody together there. Yeah. Took my daughter, who works for, Hollywood Life. She's a kind of broadcast journalist in New York, and she gets to travel and do a lot of cool stuff. She had a chance to do some work in LA, so I took her out there with me, and she did some stuff for the PLL when she was out there. So it was nice to. She had done some internships out there, and I'd run camps out there before, so it was nice to do that. And I tried to tie some stuff in. When we played in San Jose, I spent 2 days in San Francisco, which is, probably my favorite city. I used to run, again, camps up in Northern California, so spent a bunch of time there. So it was nice to get back to some of those places. But, those were the ones that, that I actually kind of spent some extra time in to kind of get back out and around. It's been great in that regard.
Awesome. Now, my fourth question is, who's a coach or even a leader in a different sector that you respect and try to emulate that's, outside the sport of lacrosse, whether it's, a CEO of a company or, like I said, a coach of another sport?
That's a good question. Because honestly, what I've always done is I kind of try to take a little bit from different people. It's funny. I look at, I do a lot of reading, but not necessarily kind of reading on leaders because of my business, but I do read a lot about coaches. I do read a lot about kind of, from being at WNL, a little bit of a Civil War buff. Sure. I kind of take a lot from and learn a lot from that and how they manage people and how they, they handle themselves under pressure and how they handle, the stress of leading people. There's a bunch of people in coaching that, certainly we can all take things from. But I do try to look into, into other leadership kind of arenas and take what I can from different people. I wouldn't say there's one, there's one in particular, but there's a lot of people and a lot of things that I've learned, just by taking pieces here and there. I also learned things that, that I wouldn't do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, sometimes they say you learn the most from others' mistakes and not their successes.
People that I really, admire because of the way they can go about things, and and the ease and the way they do stuff. Like Lars Tiffany was my assistant at WPLL. It was one of his first jobs, and I look at how he does things, and it's so, it's different, but it's effective. And guys like Pete Carroll and who are kind of, they take a different approach to things, and and they're very successful in that approach. And if I can take a little bit of some of what they do and how they do it, and take some of the edges off of what I do, I think that that makes me better.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you mentioned that you do some reading. My final question is, what's a book on your bookshelf that you've read or are reading right now that you'd recommend to a player or a friend?
There are a number of them, and I'm looking at them right now here as I look. A lot of it I read, mostly in order to kind of help me think a little bit differently. I mean, this is gonna sound crazy, but I start to read some of this stuff from someone like Marcus Aurelius. It's
Meditations is my favorite book.
Meditation. I'm holding it in my hand right now.
Yep.
And it's a challenge to read and get through.
Yep.
Right? And being able to put into context.
Yep.
But there's some of those great thinkers. They have ideas and thoughts, and if you can put it into context, I find that it's been very helpful in some of the stuff that I do. And I like there's a couple Mitch Albom books that kind of still have them, like The 5 People You Meet in Heaven.
Great book.
It makes you stuff that makes you think, or Weekends with Maury. But again, I just soon pick up a book on the Civil War too. So it's a lot of different ways. It's just a matter of making time to be able to do that.
Yep, absolutely.
So I'm shocked that you knew meditation.
Oh yeah, I'm big into Stoicism and some of those other Stoic philosophers and leaders in that. That time period really intrigues me. So
I'm surprised you didn't call bullshit on that. Come on, tell me where'd you come up with that one? But it's sitting right here on my desk.
That's awesome.
We've actually been fortunate enough. A lot of our guests have been interested in like similar books. Like we had Tom Schreiber on, who's a big fan of Tim Ferriss and the 4-Hour Workweek, and me and Adam are both, big fans of that book too, having, full-time jobs, but also working on stuff like this. So we've gotten a lot of great answers from this book question. But Adam, I know you got one more final question for Coach, if you want to ask him that.
We usually ask players, what would they tell younger players that are looking to get to the pros? But I'd like to switch it up a little bit and say, what are your thoughts on younger coaches looking to get to the pros or kind of move up in the college ranks for coaching?
Take your time. I think that everybody's in a hurry. I was in a hurry, and I think that it's important that you learn from different people, and it's changed so much from when I first started doing it at the college level. Social media, expectations, parents, athletic directors, the whole landscape has changed. So I think the two things I always say is, take your time. The grass isn't always greener. It's not always easier. It's not always better. And, sit back and enjoy a little bit of the, I think a lot of us kind of move, when you're a high achiever, you want to get to a certain level, you go from one milestone to the next, and you just keep looking for that next milestone or peak, and you never kind of sit back and really appreciate and celebrate what you've accomplished. So, I've accomplished a lot of things that are way beyond what my, the reason I got into it. The reason I got into it in the first place, I love being around the guys. I love being in the locker room. I love games. I like developing. It was never about wins and losses or accolades. But, at some point, you can lose sight of that. And I think that's, it's important to be able to hit that reset. But I'd enjoy the victories, enjoy the accomplishments, and don't be in such a hurry to get there. Your time will come, and make sure that when you're there, you're ready for everything that's going to come your way.
Yeah, that's some great advice, Coach. We really appreciate you joining us, and best of luck to the Whipsnakes this weekend in the championship. We will be watching. I just want to ask, is there any place that you want to tell people to direct them to find you online or on social media?
Yeah, I'm all over all of that. I'm on LinkedIn, for business under my name, the MVP Development Group. I've become more active on Twitter because my daughter is an influencer, so she's helped me.
Okay.
Any uptick you see in anything I'm doing or anything that looks like it's kind of above me, it is, and it's because of her. So I try to. It's become I hate to say a necessary evil, but it is a part of kind of who we are. It's how you communicate now, and that's been one of those things that I had to get better at.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Coach. Again, best of luck to you and the Whipsnakes this weekend, and we appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you.